Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Francis Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Francis Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's special guest, I'm so excited. I've known Andrea for years from a case in DC Superior Court Abuse and Neglect System, and I'm so excited because Andrea Jones just started a new company, the Caregiver's D.R.E.A.M. And when I heard about it, I said, you have to come on the show and tell everybody about it. So Andrea, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about the Caregiver's D.R.E.A.M. What's the company? What's the purpose? Who do you help?
Thank you, Francis. Yes, we have known each other a long time. It's so great to be on your show. Thank you. Thank you for the invite. My name is Andrea Jones, and really the Caregiver's D.R.E.A.M. was really born. It was me and 5 other women that saw the need for parent support for parents and caregivers that have children with IEPs and 504s. I do have 3 children who have IEPs, and a lot of times, especially being at those IEP meetings and really trying to understand what I'm reading, I felt very isolated. And meeting these other women who have similar family structures that went through similar experiences, we were like, okay, great. We're not on an island. This is a thing. And so we came together to create the Caregiver's D.R.E.A.M. to really support other caregivers. We always, remind other parents and caregivers that you are not on an island. What you heard is right, how to advocate for your child, and really uplifting the voice of the parent in those situations.
Which is what my firm and the show was all about, is like, right, to teach parents out there, because, as you know, both my kids are neurodiverse as well. And it is hard, even with all of my knowledge and all of my history and how many times I've been to IEP meetings. As a parent, it still gets difficult on my own side, because it's still, this is about my kid.
Exactly.
This is what, and they're talking about my kid now. And even with like all of my knowledge of, I could probably get my kids into any placement I wanted to, if I wanted to, but like, it's still that battle that you might have to have. And, and it is isolating. It's especially with our neurodiverse kids, because it's not like we can have our normal, regular, I don't want to say normal, like regular play dates. Right?
Yes. Which is one thing we are trying to create, because it's true. I remember when my daughter's now 13, but I remember in 1st and 2nd grade, like parents making play dates and purposely excluding my child. I remember going to back to school nights, and like her friends in the classroom that usually, would talk to her during the parents would see my daughter stimming and like move their child away, so those things happen. And, what I want to do, of course, education around inclusion, because inclusions, when we talk about classroom inclusion, we're talking about those other parents as well, making sure that they are being included and educated, and how their child, even if they're neurotypical, how do you interact with a child that's neurodiverse, and how do we create that inclusion in every aspect, of that child's life. So,
And that's I was just gonna say, last week's show I had, and I'm spacing on her name, but she, Reach Every Voice is her company, and we were talking about AAC devices a lot, and how other parents can help integrate the child, and not do that, oh wait, they're different, and pull away and stuff like that, and have the play dates and do the go that extra step to make it work. That's it, Lisa Quinn, that was her name, from Reach Every Voice, and it was great. And she recommended, I have to say it, she recommended the movie Out of My Mind, and I don't know
Oh,
if you've
okay.
seen it.
Yeah.
It's a new movie,
No.
relatively new movie on Disney Plus, and it's
Okay.
about a girl, nonverbal, with cerebral palsy, and how she's in the back trailer with all the special ed kids, and they're doing like ABC stuff, and she's in sixth grade, listening to a tape, and how they start an inclusion program, and it was amazing. Like,
Oh, that's wonderful.
so spot on the reality of what these kids and parents go through just because she's in a wheelchair, she has cerebral palsy, she's nonverbal, and how being excluded and all this other stuff. And I mean, both my husband and I were crying. My
Yeah.
girls, I would do this. And I'm like, that's what mommy does every day. That's what it's about. It's like, like
Yeah.
all supporting each other, like parenting
Right.
is hard. Parenting neurodiverse kids is even harder. And I love that you guys started this to like support parents in that we're not alone, you know,
Right.
and that's
Yes.
the thing. So how does it work? Like, how does Caregivers Dream work as an organization?
So right now we are building out the IEP, our IEP support program. So with this program, we would support other parents in the IEP setting, not in a legal capacity, of course, but in a support capacity, because a lot of parents don't even know that you can, as long as you know the child and therefore the benefit of the child, you can attend. You can invite anyone to the meetings. And so, we're kind of saying, hey, if you need an extra person there, because sometimes it gets very emotional. I've been in IEP meetings where it was combative, where I was yelled at and talked down to. So, like in those moments, you need somebody else there. Um, in that moment where it was combative, I was at a different space where I can still stand firm and advocate. But a lot of parents, especially in the beginning, if you're getting that type of adverse reaction like that, and you're already in an emotional state, and you already have to read all this legal jargon, it's overwhelming. It's overstimulating. Um, it's all the things. And so we wanted to develop a program where, we can sit right beside you and, take notes if you want us to. Just, cheer you on, be supportive in whatever way you need in that moment. So, we're hoping to build that out by the spring and, into the next school year, really support parents in that IEP process.
And it's so important, and I say it all the time, is that advocates are phenomenal and they have their place. And as you said, not doing the legal aspect, because
Right.
when it gets to the point, okay, now's when we need a lawyer to come in.
Right.
And that's what I say. And then sometimes in some situations, starting with an advocate could be even better, because then if it does get bad later, combative later, and it does need to go over to a lawyer, we now have the advocate that can testify as to what happened in all the meetings,
Exactly.
because a lawyer at a
Exactly.
meeting can't be the witness, but an
Right.
advocate can, and so,
Exactly right. That was our thought. Mhm.
yeah, is that, and it's nice that just to have somebody sitting by you. I remember a meme one time, and it showed this long table. There were like 10 people on one side and there's one person on the other side. And the quote says, "Mr. Jones, I don't understand why you think it's important for you to bring somebody with you." Like,
It's
right?
so funny. They must have came in one of my meetings because that
Mhm.
actually literally happened to me when there was an OSSI decision for a non-public placement,
Mhm.
and it was one of those situations where like these IEP meetings, like at the time I didn't know like everyone has to be at the table. And normally the IEP meetings, so and so say they can't come, so and so say they can't come. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. So it would be like 3 or 4 people there. This non-public placement, everybody came.
Yeah.
Everybody came to the table, and I'm sitting there like a deer in headlights, like, oh my gosh, like some of these people I'm just meeting for the first time, but they're always on the IEP
Yeah. On the
sign-in
cover
sheet.
page.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, that's definitely a real thing, and it's very intimidating, whether intentional or not, um, to have that. So, we definitely want to be that second person that just really supports the parent. It's like, you got this. You know your child. You know what your child needs, and to advocate.
Yeah, and that's a lot of it, is that remembering as the parent, you are just as important and know just as much as every single person in that room, if not more,
A
because
thousand percent.
you've
Yeah.
seen this, like in all the
Right.
settings. They see your kid for how
24/7.
long, right? And
Right.
it frustrates me sometimes when the schools, often talk down to my clients, and
Yeah.
we don't allow that, clearly. But
Oh,
it's like,
you definitely don't allow it.
I know you
I
know.
see you in action. You do
Uh,
not
Nuh-uh,
allow.
we don't go that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, but that's the other thing, is to know you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And everybody says that. Um, but with special education, there are so many nuances and
Yeah.
so many little things. And schools say things because it's the policy or what they've always done, and don't always know that it's not legal. It's completely against the
Right.
law. And parents,
Yeah.
we hire experts to take care of things, right? So
Mhm.
the school's the expert. Why would they not be doing what's best for my child? And as I say all the time, it's not, I don't blame the teachers. I don't necessarily blame the staff. Sometimes they just don't know any better either. But,
Yeah.
how many times have schools says, well, it's not in our budget. We can't do that for your child because it's not in our budget.
Yes.
Excuse me? You get federal funding for my
Additional
child,
funding.
and it is in their budget. Like,
Yeah.
my child needs it. You're going to find this in your budget. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, but
And
parents
that's
don't
exactly
know.
right.
Yeah.
And which is also the reason why, if don't notice, I'm in my car. I'm not driving, but I'm in my car. But like, I had to make sure like I came on your podcast, just, the importance of parents understanding like how important they are, in that meeting. And especially with transitional periods, like elementary to middle to high
Yeah.
school to adults,
Although,
especially the high school to adults.
yeah.
Very, very important. It is very important to have that support, to make sure that as your child is transitioning through these grades, that they're getting the appropriate support for them to be successful. Whether they get a diploma or a certificate, the goal is, success and independency and all the things, the betterment of your child and your child's future. And the schools, regardless of budget, regardless of all, it is their duty. It
Yeah.
is their federal duty, to take care of these kids since they are receiving money.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
And with the
yeah,
transitions, you were saying the transition from high school, whether it's a diploma or a certificate track,
yeah.
that planning starts so much earlier. When the child's 14, well, supposed to, right? And again,
I
I will
mean,
put the link in the show
technically,
notes. Yeah. I had somebody on my show talking about how it really needs to start in elementary school.
oh,
And I'll
100%.
put the link in, and how she was talking about, you have to, as a parent, what do you want for your child? What does your child want for themselves? And what do you want for your child? And what is after high school going to look like?
Hmm.
And then be able to reverse engineer it to make sure the school IEP is focused on and teaching those skills,
Yeah.
because it's the transition. yes, IEPs end when you graduate, whether it's high school diploma or certificate, IEPs end. However, the school's responsibility is to get your child to the best of their ability to where they can be at that ending of the IEP. Not just,
Exactly.
oh, IEP is done, you're on your own.
It,
Right.
which happens a lot. And I
Yeah.
remember when my daughter was in second grade, actually at that same OSCE meeting, and I said, like, I need to make sure that, the support is for the child because, when she graduates from high school, and the OSCE rep was like, high school? Oh, Miss Jones, you're thinking too far ahead. She's only in the second grade. And I'm like, she's neurodiverse. Like, and there is a chance she's not going to go to college, which is another thing, like this push for college. But that's a whole nother one.
I
I'll
don't
put a
know.
pin in that. But
Yeah.
I feel like I could go on like 20 different tangents.
Yep.
But yeah, like, no, that is what you're supposed to be thinking in first, second grade. Like, what supports does my child need? So when they graduate from high school, whatever they choose to do, if they choose to go to a 4-year, community college, trade school, work, what supports do they need to get them to their destination? And, it's so funny how we talk about, like, we talk about early interventions and early interventions for diagnoses, appropriate diagnoses, which is great. But it's like your diagnoses, but then you don't support the child through their growth, through their
Right.
development
Right.
appropriately. So what
Yeah.
is the point of getting the diagnosis if you're not going to get the support needed?
Right.
So,
Right.
my
Exactly.
opinion.
And that's the thing. And again, like we say, I remember coming home from the hospital with my first one going, oh my God, now what? Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's the same thing as the parents with neurodiverse kids. It's the same thing of you get this diagnosis and now what? Right. And now what?
Yes.
And that's where I know my podcast comes in, my YouTube channel comes in. Here's what. Here's people that can support you. Here's people that can help you get that IEP in place. Make sure it's right. Make sure the school's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Because oftentimes people are like, oh, yeah, they have the diagnosis, but there's no educational impact, so they don't qualify. And then dismiss the parents, which is so not true. And I think you froze, or did I freeze? Okay, so Andrea froze. So I'll keep going because I know she'll jump back on in a minute. But yeah, it's so important. And I love that Andrea started this because, as I've said, we've known each other for years. She knows her stuff. She knows this well. And as parents, we need that extra support. Like, my tagline, you do not need to do this all alone. There's absolutely no reason to do this all alone. We are here to support you. There are other providers out there to support you. Andrea's company, the Caregivers D.R.E.A.M, based out of DC, is there to help teach you to advocate. And as Andrea said, be able to sit there next to you, and just be there, even if you don't want them to say anything. That the fact that there's somebody there sitting with you can be so empowering, because it can then give you that that empowerment, just knowing that you have somebody to support you, right? Like, you're up against a school. I hate saying that because it's supposed to be a team, but sometimes it's not. You're advocating for your child hard. Even just having somebody sit next to you, even if they don't say anything, it's nice to have that, to know that you have somebody back behind you there. And so it's so important. And I know Andrea brought in the transitions. And I say that all the time, is that when you're going from preschool to kindergarten, 5th grade to 6th grade is usually the middle school, 8th grade to 9th grade, and then senior and out, those transitions are so important because I would say I want to say 100% of the school systems, unless you're in a non-public school that goes throughout K through 12, um, services look very, very different, even in the same program. What they offer in elementary school, what they offer in middle school, what they offer in high school are very, very different programming. And having somebody that knows that program is so important to help guide you to see what is best for your child. Because you know what? It's not, oh, this is all we offer, so this is what your child has to take. I remember one school meeting decades ago. They're like, "Well, we don't offer that at our high school." Okay, but you just said in this meeting, and everybody at this table just said in this meeting, that this child needs self-contained instruction, diploma bound, right? So if they're saying that in the meeting, they can't say, well, you can't send them to our, that we can't put that in the IEP because the school doesn't have that. So Andrea, I was just talking about, and you're muted still. I was just talking about how transitions is so important because it looks so different in middles and high school, even pre-K to elementary school.
Yeah.
And that schools often say, oh, well, what does the school offer? Oh, the school doesn't offer self-contained. The school only offers supported. So let's go back and change the IEP to supported English. I'm like, no. You just said self-contained English.
Right.
And if you don't provide that at that school, okay, what school does provide it? Because now you're going to bust this child there.
Right. Yeah.
But that's where, right. But that's also where an advocate or attorney comes in, is very helpful, because looking at, well, what is your choice? Where do you want your child? Right.
Yeah.
Because some parents want their child on the in-boundary school. I want my kid in the neighborhood school. I don't care. We'll figure it out. Okay. So we'll make sure we focus on whatever the in-boundary school offers and give them those support. Others are like, I don't care. I want what's best for my child. If non-public is what's best, that's what I want. And so knowing that coming in helps guide you as well.
Yeah. And also with having like a parent network, because I know our executive director, she wanted to send her child to a school, and within our network, come to find out, two other parents have been having some IEP issues and having to fight for supports that are needed. And so she was like, okay, well, let me look somewhere else then. So that's also the importance of having a community and making sure you don't feel like you're on an island, because, you can have from a legal standpoint that, but also from a community standpoint, what schools are doing the best for our children? What schools are not doing the best for our children, based on word of mouth, based on, the data. And so having that community, and also like through us, like making sure that, we say, hey, this school's doing pretty good. This school, you may want to reconsider, or have extensive conversations to make sure it's the best fit for your child.
And I get calls all the time about, we're moving. We want to know what schools, and now out in Montgomery County, everybody always says the W's, Winston Churchill, Whitman, Walter Johnson, and Wooten, are the best schools, but they're not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're still top schools in Montgomery County, but that doesn't mean they're the best schools for your child.
Right.
And that they have the right setting for your child.
Correct.
And that's what I always say. It's looking at what the school offers. And yes, while you can get programming at any, like if your child goes to a school that doesn't have it, then they can bus them to the other school. Is that what you want? If you're thinking about moving, right? Let's move to let's be in the in-boundary school of the program that you want. So
and the reliability of transportation too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's transportation, that's one thing about like, because right now my daughter's older, and now her school's like, oh, maybe we should talk about non-public. And I'm like, yeah, really? We should have had, but that's neither here nor there. But now I have to like think about the bus ride. Like, will she be able to handle an hour-long bus ride? Will they provide the supports? I mean, her school is up the street, and her bus comes an hour late every day. So, that disrupts everything. That disrupts academics, that disrupts like routine. Because my daughter has autism, she has to have a routine. So I can't imagine if she's bused to Maryland or Virginia and the bus ride is longer and they're not picking her up on time, if at all. Because there was a couple of times where they just didn't show up. And then we called and said, and they were like, oh, we couldn't find a driver.
Yeah.
We'll just reimburse you.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
reimburse me for what? They'll reimburse you for the mileage, not for the 2 hours you had to take off work to drive out there, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And the mileage is pennies, compared to the financial impact of having to miss work and, just all these things that have this effect on parents that are just not taken into consideration in a lot of spaces. And it is so funny to me, not to keep bouncing around on topics, but I just get so passionate about it. I'm just want to release it all on your podcast. But how in DC there's these like new talks of legislation around parent accountability, and it's to me and to my organization, we're like, wait, but you haven't even fixed your accountability before we talk about parent accountability in this aspect. As I said, there's been days where, I had to take my daughter to school, and that aspect, what if I didn't have a car?
Right.
What if I didn't have money for Uber? Actually my daughter, I don't really feel comfortable her taking an Uber by herself. But like, what if those barriers were in place? And so now my daughter is absent from school, and now I'm getting phone calls, and now we're talking about truancy, like this whole rabbit hole that parents, like just spiral down into, and then you create legislation around parent accountability.
Yeah.
To me, it's just,
yeah. And then the other thing, what we see in the abuse and neglect system often is the truancy coming in and the kids are older. But I keep telling the courts, you need to have an education attorney or at least an advocate review all this stuff before you bring in a charge on educational neglect, because I will tell you 10 times out of 10, it's because the child's not getting appropriate services. I mean, I had one that was in 8th grade and was reading on a 1st grade level and didn't have an IEP. Didn't have an IEP.
Oh my gosh.
Had an IQ. Her IQ was under 70 as well, on top of it. So intellectual disability. So what do you think this child's doing? Why is this child not going to school? Oh, I don't know. And it was just horrifying that the schools did this. And at that point, I mean, I don't want to say she's a lost cause. I mean, I definitely never say that. But at that point that you're now just getting her services, she's lived this whole life up to this point. And I had to fight hard on that one because they said the adaptive skills were too high. And I turned around and I said,
what?
Because your adaptive, for intellectual disability, your adaptive scores need to be low as well. And I said, I looked at them, everybody in that room. I said, because you know what? If her adaptive scores weren't high, we wouldn't be here because she'd be dead. There's a big difference. Where she grew up and how she grew up, it wasn't her learning adaptive skills and being able to adapt. It was her learning how to live and how not to live.
Survival.
And that's why.
That's hierarchy.
And the kids, the school looked at me and they just kind of like light bulbs started going off because it was true, and like, again, those are things that parents don't know. Now, obviously it was a very different situation. That parent wasn't very involved and all that other stuff, but parents don't know and don't know to push. And then you get to the point where it's challenging. And I definitely never say it's never too late. I have gotten 11th graders IEPs because the parents fought. Finally, I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just call an attorney, and boom, I was able to get it. So it's never too late. what I also always say, which I know you do too, to parents, is that don't should on yourself. Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah,
When we make
yeah,
decisions as
definitely.
parents, we are doing the best we can with the knowledge we have at that point in time. When we know better, we do
Absolutely.
better, right?
And
And that's
and also, oh, I'm sorry.
no,
I
no,
was
go
going to
ahead.
say, and also another thing, I also want to bring up is grieving. So what we've done a couple of like parent cafes just around grieving, and I when people hear the word grief, they think of like loss of loved one or loss of job. But I said, honestly, when you get that initial diagnosis of your child, there is a grief that comes with it. And
Yeah,
because up until this point, you have all these, my child's going to do this and do this and do this. And now you're getting the notice like, your child's not going to do any of that or not going to do that in that way.
right.
And it's a thing that parents have to deal with. And honestly, when I hear sometimes, I can tell parents that are going through grief, and they say, "Oh, my child just has a little bit of autism." And
Right,
to me, that kind of signals that you haven't completed grieving the diagnosis.
right.
And not to say there's nothing wrong or right, but sometimes it gives that explanation as to why aren't they advocating? Why are they just accepting this as there is? I said, because there's a process that has to go through. And if you don't have a support system, and again, if you feel like you're on that island, you don't know what's going on with you, or you need somebody to name it for you, to kind of
Yeah,
pull you out of it and say, hey, you are grieving and it's
yeah,
okay. For me, I went through a lot of grief that, my daughter is not going to go to college because I went to college. And so that was my expectation for me growing up. Like, you have to go to college. And so that's what I
mm,
was like. And then the pediatrician and the psychologist is like, that may not be her way. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what is my future? What is the future going to look like for my child? What does that mean? And and so it's just that grieving process of that, and then it's to the understanding of what supports do they need for this new future that they don't understand and you don't understand,
right.
because it's totally different than your upbringing. So it's just like when you said earlier, like the nuances. It's just also those. Besides the nuances of an IEP meeting itself, it's also those nuances of the understanding and the grief that a lot of parents, especially newly diagnosed parents, are going through. And it's such a shame in those moments they have
Yeah,
to go into an IEP meeting and get berated,
yeah,
and they have
yeah.
to, or they're not getting the appropriate supports, or they're, to me, just kind of getting over because they understand the fact that this parent is just overwhelmed.
And
Um,
I was
so
saying it's
yeah,
also the schools limiting the kids' ability, and that's where out of my mind goes in a lot to that as well. Um,
yeah,
but like, yeah, it's 100% there's a grieving period, and there's nothing wrong with you as a parent for grieving because you know what?
correct,
All parents grieve.
correct,
My child is not going to be what I envision for my child. Well, welcome to the
correct.
real world. None of our children are going to be what we want for our child, right?
That's right.
But that being said, like it's I know for me, it's my fear of what is the future going to look like for her?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's not
Yes.
going to be the same as what my future was, what my parents wanted from me, what their parent, and generationally, it's going to be different. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's getting over that fear and 100% the grief. And there's nothing wrong with grieving it, being okay. But then it's like dust it off. We're good. Now let's move forward and see where we're
And
going.
let's advocate.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Like, don't. I always tell people, like, you can feel it, but don't live in it.
Right.
I say
Exactly.
that all the time. It's okay to have that feeling. It's not okay to live in it, because then
Yeah.
it not only affects you and your health, but also affects the child. Because you never
Yeah.
want your child to feel like, oh, I'm not going to college, then I'm not smart.
Right.
Because children, like, they always look up to their parents. Like, I have to tell my daughter all the time, I'm not perfect.
Right.
I'm
I do it
learning.
all the time. I tell them, I'm like, you know
Yeah.
what, mommy, sorry. I know I just yelled at you and I probably shouldn't
Yeah.
have, and I'm really
Oh
sorry,
man.
but this is what frustrated me. And
Yes.
but that's being a good parent, role modeling.
Just
Perfect.
being vulnerable, like just letting your children know, like you don't have it 100% all the time, and
Yeah,
sometimes you do lose your temper, but it just shows emotional intelligence and is modeling that for your kids. Like I got upset, but let's come back to the table and let's talk about it. And that's what I always strive for, just to make sure they understand that. So when they're adults, they can benefit from that too. And but yeah, it's such a hard thing for parents, and I always stress community. Like I always stress it,
yeah,
because you have all of these thoughts and emotions and just all the things. On top of, like, a lot of people are just not in socioeconomic, um, they don't have a lot of resources. So
right.
now you're dealing with that on top of that, and then culturally there are differences, and there's just it's just so layered. Um, and without that community, you're going to feel like you're drowning on top of having to sit, like the example you gave of 10 versus 1. If you've never been to an IEP meeting before, you're going to be like, whoa, who are all these people?
Yeah,
What is going on? It's very intimidating. Again, whether intentional or not, it's very intimidating. So I can't stress enough, community. Find a community,
yeah. Build your
that you feel
community.
comfortable. Yeah, that you can share, even if you're frustrated, that you can share without judgment. And that's what the caregiver stream, that's what we're definitely looking to build, is community.
Yeah, and that's so important because it's just, and like as you said, get over the grief. I remember one time saying something about one of my daughter's diagnosis, and somebody said, "I'm sorry." I'm like, "Sorry for what?" You know, right? Like this is
Yes,
this does not define my child. This is how my
correct.
child's brain works. There's nothing to be sorry
Exactly.
about. Like let's be
I've
real
gotten
here.
those too.
What are you sorry for? But it's also
Yeah.
that's what I was saying. You said before, teaching neurotypical parents on how to interact, on
Yeah.
how to right is so
Yeah,
important.
it's not a life sentence. And
Yeah.
even like within the Black community, I've had a lot of parents say when their child was diagnosed with autism, like just being part of the church, and the church saying like, oh, it's this autism can be prayed away.
Oh, jeez.
Um, and I mean, I even had like when my daughter was young, I'm telling you, I got stories for days. I've had somebody tell me like, "Oh, you didn't tithe enough, or
Oh,
you're
jeez.
not doing these things enough. Like you have to cast it out of her." And it's very
Yeah.
disheartening.
Yeah.
Again, which is why parents will, walk around saying that their child has a little bit of autism, because they don't want that judgment.
Right.
I've
Right.
had my daughter have meltdowns in public, and people like, "Oh, well, you should do so and so." Of course, like spanking,
Not
and I'm
always,
like,
right?
I'm not going to spank my
I love it.
child for her
Right.
having an emotional dysregulation,
Exactly.
because
Exactly. I'm not punishing my
so it's
child. Right. Like, yeah.
yeah,
So
it's just one of those things. But I'll never forget. I I used to hate, to be honest, hate taking my daughter when she was younger to grocery stores. Just because, not because of her having the meltdowns, because, through her therapy and things, they taught me how to handle that. It was just other people, like, giving their
yeah.
opinion. Like, I've had people say, well, send her to me for a week. I'll straighten her out, just
Oh
things like
God.
that.
Yeah. Nuh-uh.
And,
Yeah.
but I did have a cashier tell me one time, he was like, you are doing a great job. The way you handled her, amazing. And I like broke down crying in the middle of the grocery store. I didn't even
I
realize
know.
it.
I know. And
Um,
I'm remembering a time I was in Utah And my oldest had one of her emotional dysregulations, and she goes and hides in small places and went and hid in this cave. And
Mhm.
another mom just went, like, I got you. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Like she's like,
yeah.
gotcha, I don't remember what the hand thing was. I know it wasn't, but it was just something like she was acknowledging and saying, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm supporting you. I know what you're going
Yeah.
through. And that was, for that moment, just made me breathe, that it was okay.
Oh my
Because I
gosh.
know as a parent, you get anxious when your child gets, and like, oh my God, what
And
are
you don't
people
even
gonna say? What
realize
am I gonna do? Yeah.
you're holding your breath. Well, I know I didn't
Yeah.
until she said something, and I was like,
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
didn't realize. I was just like that anxiety. I was like, I was literally holding my breath. But yeah, that's just amazing. That's community, and and it's just a beautiful thing when it happens.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just want to see it happen more.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
I think that'll happen through education. Um, not just for parents with IEPs, but for parents that children do not have IEPs. Just the education around disability and
Yeah.
the inclusion. Um, so that's my dream.
Yep.
That's my dream. That's what I advocate for. True
Yeah.
inclusion.
Yep. Exactly. Wrap around. And it goes back, my new meme that I talk about all the time is the meme with the flower. When a flower can't grow, you change its environment, not the flower.
I love
And
that saying.
that's right. That's our kids with disabilities. We need to change the
Exactly.
environment, not our child.
Yeah, it's
Don't
not the child's fault. It's your
Yeah. Like,
environment.
a child shouldn't stim because you're uncomfortable about it, Like, that's not the way
Yeah,
this works. Yeah.
yeah.
So I know I'm watching the time because I know both of us have 1 o'clock. So, um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah,
you and I can go on for.
I know. Right. But I want to wrap it around back to the caregiver's dream because I'm sure people are out
Sure.
there right now saying, I can't afford it. How can I afford this? I can barely afford to pay my rent. So how does that work with caregiver's dream?
So with the IEP support program, it wouldn't really be it wouldn't be a cost involved. Again, we are there to support you, and just be there for you. So we're not giving legal advice, like we're not working for you, but we are just there. Just if you need us to take notes, like if you just need to bounce an idea, off of your head, just in that capacity. Or just someone to sit there, if you say something, just smile and nod, like, yeah, you got it. Just be your cheerleader right there in the IEP meeting. So for us, we don't see that as putting a cost on that level of support. We're hoping and planning in the future, maybe we can grow it out. Um, so if you do need legal advice, we can partner with like lawyers in the area that can provide that. But as for right now, we just want to make sure that the parent is supported so they don't feel overwhelmed. Um, so there won't be a cost for that. But there'll be like an intake process to figure out like what the parent needs and what capacity and for how long, just to make sure like our volunteers will be able to support that parent. So
Makes
that is our
sense.
goal. Yeah, so
That's awesome.
that's definitely our goal, and I'm
And
looking
do
forward to
you
rolling this out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I mean, are you just doing DC? Are you doing DC, Maryland, Virginia? Or have you guys not
So
even gotten to that point yet?
we are just doing DC. I reached out to an advocate at the Parents Place, which they're the
Mhm.
PTI in Maryland. And she's like, whenever you're ready for Maryland, we can partner with you. So, but I know it's needed because I work at a school in Maryland, and I do little parent trainings here and there, like just to kind of like advocate for yourself. Try to slide it in there. But right now it is just because we're just like really small at DC, but we are definitely looking to grow into Maryland, especially Prince George's County, and Montgomery County. And again,
And
hopefully partnering with other places.
for those that are watching that might be in the position, because I get this often of my clients that are a little more fluent of like, what do the parents that can't afford it do? And if there are people out there that want to do donations, are you accepting donations?
We do. At www.thecaregiversdream.org, we are taking donations. We are also accepting volunteers. So if, they are in a position where they have the time to support a parent, and it doesn't have to be, because I know people are like, well, I don't know IEPs. It's really like an emotional support. So telling the parent, you're doing a great job right now in this meeting. Reminding the parent, hey, do you need to take a break? Because sometimes, it gets pretty intense. And so to be that person that says, I think, Miss Smith needs to take a break right now. So we're going to take a 5-minute break and come back. Like just being that person there to just support them in that capacity. It doesn't mean, you don't have to understand like IEP hours and things like that. So if they want to volunteer in that capacity, there's also a volunteer button, and there's also a donation button.
That's
awesome. On our website.
Yeah, because I want to get that. I want to get that out there also, because I know there's a lot of parents of neurodiverse kids that might financially be able to support and want to help the community in that way. And so I want to get that out there. But this has been, as I knew, absolutely phenomenal. I love it because I know I had somebody on my show that is a nonprofit in Virginia that does free advocacy. So now I'm like, okay, I got Virginia, I got DC. Now I got to find my Maryland person,
I know.
Yeah. Cause there is disability rights in Maryland, but they're lawyers and it's a little bit different. But there are services out there, and as parents, build your community. And that's where the other thing with parents, talking to other parents come up of like, oh, wait, you need a doctor that does XYZ. This one is great.
Oh, yeah.
It takes insurance. Like that alone is huge, right? Like that's a whole nother topic. Yeah.
Yes. But that is huge. Just the support I've gotten, from other parents. And like, how do I do this? Oh, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Especially from parents who have adult children. Oh my gosh, they help me all the time. Exactly. All the time, because they're like, oh yeah, we've been through all this, just go here.
Yep.
So yes,
this has been so awesome, Andrea. Thank you so much for coming on and share, and I know we'll have the link to the Caregiver's Dream, and thank you for all the good work you're doing.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Stress-Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.